Hello, everyone. Thanks very much again for joining us on the Marketing Resolution YouTube channel. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing these videos. Today I have with me a friend that I can honestly say is not an old friend, but we have known each other for quite some time, 25 years in fact. Hi, Stewart. How are you?
I'm good, Natalie. How are you today?
Doing very well, thanks. It's nice to see your face again. It's been a few years.
Yours too. All right. It really is a pleasure. I love the ambiance of what's behind you. It's lovely to see.
Oh, thanks. The piece of art, actually, I'll get off topic a little bit. The piece of art is a friend of mine, Lee Hendrickson, and he was a bench scientist. And what he does is take various elements, caffeine, red wine, aspirin, various different things, and he puts them under a microscope and, expands the image, I don't know, 11 billion times. And this is the image that he gets. And this one happens to be a red wine crystal. And we live in France, and it's wine country. That's a red wine crystal.
Lovely.
Abstract art. So we'll give Lee Hendrickson a little plug. So,
Great.
But mostly what I want to talk about is you and your practice. Resolution works in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I know that that's where your office is. I also know that you're not limited to practicing just in the Bay Area, that you're available for everyone anywhere in the world. But I wanted to ask you if you could explain to everyone a little bit about your practice, because it is different, it is unique from other practices, and your clients are somewhat different than other mediators' clients. And so, and I know that everyone can just go to resolutionworks.com, but it's much better if we hear it directly from you.
Sure. So the short story is that in terms of evolution, I was originally trained as a divorce mediator in 1986 by a guy named John Haynes, who many people considered to be kind of one of the leading folks in terms of modern divorce mediation practice. And that's the work I did for a number of years, and then I started to do some other things. But aside from my background as a practicing attorney, I also spent 6 years inside corporate America as a marketing person. And so after a period of time of doing mostly divorce mediation, I kind of moved my work over into working with organizations, small partnerships, divisions of organizations, the state of California, major corporations. And the way the work has evolved, in some ways I used to lead with resolving conflict, but one day the light bulb went off in my mind and I realized, wow, the reason we resolve conflict, whether it's in a corporate setting or even in a divorce situation, especially where we have kids that need to be co-parented, the reason that we resolve conflict is so that we could get to collaboration and so that we could learn to work together. So in some ways, of late, the marketing mantra that I use is I will improve collaborative capacity in any organization. And the way to it is through things like communication skills, emotional intelligence, relationship building, but most important, and it's kind of the final exam for all of those other pieces, can you move through differences and conflict? How can you do that well? So it's two sides of the same coin, but collaboration is a lot more pleasant to lead with. And people always like to hear about higher levels of performance versus dealing with dysfunction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's no great stretch of the imagination to see why. So I know that on your website, you have courses. You've got programs for couples. You've got programs for individuals. You've got programs for corporations. You've got all kinds of different retreats and environments for people to learn these skills and to move away from conflict and toward collaboration. Can you describe for me maybe a class for an individual versus a class for a couple versus a class for a company?
Sure. So I'm chuckling. The reason I'm chuckling is because in 1998, which was almost 20 years ago, my first book was published. And the title of the book was Getting to Resolution, Turning Conflict into Collaboration. And so it's really interesting. That may have been a very prescient book title because that's where the work has evolved. So in some sense, very, very similar principles. You know, whether you're a couple, whether you're working in a partnership, whether you're working in a team environment, in an organization, the skills are very, very simple. I've developed some conversational models for how you, pardon me, the steps of moving through conflict. One, and there are actually 7, 8 steps in the model, but really only 3 action steps. Telling stories, meaning getting facts and information out on the table. Number 2, dealing with the emotion, because the biggest mistake that people make is they rush to get an agreement and they haven't dealt with the underlying emotion of the conflict. And so it's not really resolved. And the third thing is creating a prospective agreement. How are we going to be with each other in the future? So in work with couples getting divorced, what's the relationship? What's the new relationship they want to create with each other? In working with a team, what's the culture that we want to create? How are we going to live with each other? You know, and that team is, whether it's a team, a government agency, a big project, whatever it happens to be. So in some sense, the different bodies of work are almost customized for every kind of single engagement. You know, an example would be next month, or actually in a little over 2 weeks, I'll be working with the department head senior leaders of a municipal government and helping them build a culture based upon, you know, resolution and agreement, and having them identify what it is that they want to build together. That tends to lead to higher levels of performance. So there you have it. That's an example. Mm-hmm.
That's a really good example. I like that. I love the work that you do, because it's not just a single off situation. You do help people resolve the conflict or the issue that's at hand, but more importantly, you provide a platform for them to learn the necessary skills to be able to truly move forward, not just set that aside and move on, but to really move forward. And those skills are just applicable, across the board in almost every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, I try to teach people, and I often say to people, and when I'm working in organizational environments, I will actually say, you know, lucky you. Your employer, your organization is paying for your education today. And as a perk, you get to take this home, because they really are critical, pardon me, life skills. And I liked your realization that, I'm not just throwing a fish at people when they're hungry, but I'm literally teaching people how to fish so they can do their best to remain conflict-free as they move forward in life. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, one of the common denominators, I've been representing mediators and arbitrators worldwide for 2.5 decades now. One of the common denominators that I find to be so lovely and so ironic is that most resolutionists are conflict averse. And here we sit, online or in hearing rooms or in courtrooms or whatever our venue might be, surrounded by people who start their process with an issue, with conflict, with dispute, in hopes that we can help them resolve those things and move on and move forward in a healthful way. But I think that it's interesting that so many of us are really, truly, deep down in our hearts, we are a conflict-averse group of folks.
Well, you know, I want to add to that, Natalie, that I think is an important one. It's not that we are afraid of conflict, don't know how to deal with conflict, but we've come to recognize that somewhere inside of us, there's a peaceful place. And we'd rather live our lives in that peaceful place. So we have learned what we needed to learn in terms of skills, in terms of moving through it. And, you know, part of our mission in the world, you know, call it a peacemaker, call it a resolutionary, call it a mediator, whatever it happens to be, how is it that we can move people and situations through that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We don't want other people to be uncomfortable or unhappy or unable to sleep at night or filled with stress and anxiety or, you know, all of those kinds of things that come with not just big conflict, but little disputes and even just barely identifiable issues. They create so many problems. So anyway, on your website, I know that you've also got some books that you've written. You've got the courses, you've got your retreats, and any and all of the, you've got a blog. My goodness, I don't know how you fit it all in. But I'm going to definitely put the website into the description down below so that people can log on, look at your website, and learn about all of these different programs and books and things that you offer. Everybody should sign up to receive the blog reports. The book's phenomenal. They've been a standard in the industry for longer than I care to admit that I've been reading books about our industry. But is there anything, just to wrap things up, is there anything that is your absolute favorite, your most fun, your what's the gem in the crown of doing all this work? What do you love the most about it?
So yeah, so what I love the most about it is when you sit with, there are two things. I'm sorry, I've got to say two things.
Okay.
One is when you sit with people that are in conflict and deep conflict, whether it's a marriage or two partners or an organization that's become dysfunctional, it's almost an honor to have people trust you enough to invite you into this really sacred space of dissonance and to help them move through it. And the level of satisfaction for them and for you is really something that really touches your heart and makes you feel good as a human being, right? The other piece is something that's aspirational, and it's to get people to realize that they have a choice. And when you resolve a conflict, essentially, all you're doing is creating a new agreement for how you're going to be with each other. And we all engage in relationships with spoken or unspoken agreements. And the major reason we have dissonance is because folks aren't explicit about their agreements, and they usually different assumptions about what their understanding is about what they're doing together. If we can make more of those implicit agreements explicit, our lives can be a whole lot simpler and more productive and satisfying. And I try to get people to see that if you could just drop all of the angst, if you could just drop all of the mind chatter, if you could just drop all of the way we frame a situation in our mind and say, okay, this is not working, let's create a new agreement for moving into the future, everything would be a lot simpler. Unfortunately, we live in a world of right, wrong, fault, blame, and so people are not quite willing to step into that. But that's just, I'll plant that seed as a last thing.
That is a really good seed to plant. I know that my mediator skills have come in handy on more than one occasion when when two people in a relationship don't speak the same mother tongue, there are frequently very hilarious miscommunications. And so you have to always say, I didn't make myself clear. I didn't listen. I didn't understand. And so let me ask this question a different way. Let me try something else, because when you talk about expectations, they can lead one astray. What I thought I understood to be an upscale outing one day, because I didn't understand the language barrier, ended up with me climbing a volcano in the Caribbean in a pair of high heel shoes. So it's really important for us to pose those questions, for us to reframe what we think we've heard, and then give an answer, and then ask very politely, did I hear that correctly? Because I think this is the answer that we're looking for in this situation. So it can be little things like climbing a volcano in high-heeled shoes, and it can also be some really big things. But I think that you're right, that it is a choice. It's a diet of the mind. Mm-hmm. You do have to make an effort to adhere to a communication plan. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't change. That doesn't mean that it's not adaptable and it doesn't evolve over time. But it is a choice. You're absolutely right. So.
Yeah, well, being in that place of resolution, it's not a one-shot deal. It's an ongoing relationships. It's an ongoing process, and you get to choose whether it's a marriage, a team environment, a family context. Do you want to live in a place of dissonance, or do you want to live in a place of resolution?
Exactly right. Exactly right. And you never want to live in high heels walking a volcano. So. Better to live with resolution.
Thank you for that piece of perspective. Okay.
I didn't assume, of course, that you personally would be hiking volcanoes in high heels, but I really can't recommend it to you should you ever be inclined.
Thank you. Not this lifetime.
We'll chat again in the next one and find out how it goes for you. Well, Stewart, once again, it's such a pleasure talking to you. I always love our chats. We have fun. They're enlightening. They are reaffirming. I really like our time together. And I encourage everyone, once again, log on to Resolution Works. You will not be sorry to look at all of Stewart's various courses, books, and blog articles. And I know that if you have any questions at all, you can call him and write him. He's just the loveliest person to communicate with.
Thank you.
You are more than welcome. Listen, everybody, that's all that I have for Stewart and myself with Marketing Resolution and Resolution Works. As always, thanks for joining us. Be good humans.